So whenever we embark on whatever challenge it might be, a new job, a journey, starting a new project, there's this specific mistake that we so often make. Let's talk about the passenger-pilot dichotomy. So whenever we're facing challenges, we get to decide how we want to relate to them. But way too often I find that we have a tendency to not even notice that we have this choice, and that is the choice between whether we want to be the passenger or the pilot. The passenger and the pilot dichotomy is basically an attempt at pointing to this choice that we get to make between two very, very different, almost, I would say, opposite modes of relating to the situation at hand. The passenger relates to challenges by basically hoping passively, imagining whatever catastrophe might arise and hoping it will not arise. It is a passive relation to reality. It is, I would say, even a childlike relation to reality. We can contrast this with the pilot's relation to whatever challenge he or she is facing. Instead of hoping catastrophe will not strike, what the pilot does and the passenger doesn't is to, instead of hoping catastrophe will not strike, what the pilot does is, instead of hoping, the pilot leans back into his or her own sovereignty and realizes that whatever happens, he or she has the means to fix it, to address whatever trouble or problem or, crisis might arise. And once you approach a new challenge in this way, instead of hoping that bad things won't happen, acknowledging that bad things will happen, and acknowledging that we ourselves are empowered, sovereign actors that can actually face whatever challenge it might be. This way of thinking about potential challenges shifts our entire way of relating to said catastrophe or challenge. And that is what this video is about. In essence, while these two approaches might be, or these two modes of relating to reality might on the surface look very different, essentially the only difference is that what the pilot does and the passenger doesn't is take that extra step when imagining whatever challenge might afflict us on this journey, is to basically imagine themselves empowered enough to face the challenge, which is basically to have a plan B and a plan C. What the pilot does and the passenger doesn't is basically accept the chance of life, open themselves up to whatever might happen, and trusting in themselves as a sovereign agent able to face struggles, essentially opening him or herself up to interacting with the cosmos as it is. So why is this profound and crucial? The reason why this is profound and crucial is because what the passenger denies themselves access to is a state of freedom and empowerment, enabling them to face whatever struggle or trouble or problem or crisis might arise as someone who can handle it, someone who has the tools to actually fix whatever might come up in whatever given situation. And this changes your entire horizon of opportunity. Like it's a very, very different way of looking at the world. It's the opposite of a fearful, I hope this or this won't happen. I hope this or that won't happen. Essentially, what the pilot has access to and what the passenger denies themselves access to is empowerment before the capricious nature, you might say, of the cosmic process. And it's no wonder that we get caught up in this passenger's mode of relating to reality, right? Because we've basically been trained to enact this mode of relation to reality since we were children, right? Like children have their parents telling them what to do. But even as we grow older, we have the politicians telling us what to do. We have corporations telling us what to do. We have our friends. We have in many ways just basically entrained ourselves to subject ourselves to become these kind of passive passengers moving through our own lives, basically just watching the views, but not making a lot of choices. And what we gain from entering into the pilot's mode of relation to reality rather than the passengers is, apart from empowerment, we get to weed out a lot of that fear that necessarily must be part of the passenger's mode of being, right? If we only hope that bad things won't happen, instead of taking that extra step and saying to ourselves and knowing in our hearts that whatever might happen, we've got solutions for that. We can handle adversity. We can fix problems. If we fail to do that and merely just hope that everything will turn out great without too many struggles, that is a very, very fearful mode of being, right? Because we put out a lot of our empowerment and power in general onto the universe, right? We become hopers. We just sit around and hope. And then once the catastrophe hits, which of course it will, then we go, oh yeah, there you go. There you see, I'm unlucky. This is bad. I can't whatever handle or have success with whatever project I'm doing. And so the passenger mode of being is a very fearful mode of being. And the reason why this is so fucking important, why it, and also the way in which it relates to the, you might say, the mystical aspects of being a human being, is that when we get caught in the passenger's mode of relating to reality, we essentially disempower ourselves. We essentially relegate ourselves to be supporting actors in the cast of life. And that, I will wager, is not something that any of us will lie on our deathbeds and thank ourselves for. So let's ask ourselves, right? If I look at my own life, do I mainly relate to situations as a passenger or as a pilot? And why? For me personally, despite having worked with this dichotomy for some years by now, I still daily catch myself relating to whatever challenge it might be exactly as a passenger. Like asking questions like, how do I do this? What should, maybe I should just drop this project, or maybe it's too difficult, or maybe the universe or the cosmos is conspiring against me. But the shift I feel in my heart and in my emotional state and in my confidence whenever I make the shift from passenger to pilot is such a marvelous experience. It changes not only me, but my entire feeling and perspective on whatever project it might be or whatever situation it might be. I feel myself moving from a receiver, like hoping, okay, so what is going to happen now, to an actor, to a person who is able to look at whatever struggle is arising and just figure out a solution. And once we do this, it becomes undeniable that we are not receivers of reality. We are participants, or at least we have the potential to become participants in reality, to become builders of our own reality, which is such a sovereign and empowered state to be in. Whenever I make the shift from the passenger seat to the pilot's seat, it's a rush of confidence, right? I go from a state of seeing all the problems and feeling that maybe I can't handle them to seeing solutions. Basically, instead, you can to use a metaphor, it's like skiing down a mountain through a forest, and you get to make the choice. Will I look at all the obstacles, all the trees, and fear I will hit one of them? Or will I instead see the path through the trees, see the solutions, and with confidence navigate it. Two very, very different modes of relating to the situation at hand. It's like once we feel the rudder in our own hands, instead of sitting in the passenger seat hoping that the pilot will get us home in one piece, once we feel that rudder between our hands, something magical happens inside us. We change our entire state. We accept the responsibility of whatever struggle we're in. We become essentially the adult in the room, right? We move from being mildly disempowered and a little childlike to assuming this responsibility and making choices. So let's talk about how to move from passenger to pilot in our own lives. So what are the solutions? Well, as with so many shifts in mindset, the very first thing is, of course, to understand that this mechanism is real, to learn to catch ourselves when we place ourselves in the passenger's perceptome, call ourselves out on it, and then realize, like with so many other things, that this is a wall of fire, right? The child in us might be reluctant to shift from the passengers to the pilot seat and feel that rudder between our hands, because it endows us with a lot of responsibility and choice making that maybe we would rather be without, because the child in us wants to be led, right? But because it is a wall of fire, what happens once we put our hands on the steering wheel of the pilot seat? Another question we might ask ourselves is, does this passenger perceptome fill some obscure, potentially unhealthy function for me? Is there something I get to be right about if I remain the passenger? Is there some emotions that maybe I'm afraid that the pilot perceptome will impose on me that I won't like? These are questions that might be interesting to investigate in order to better understand why we end up in this passenger perceptome. And so every new situation we enter into is basically an opportunity, right? It's a gift. It's an opportunity to assume the responsibility and to feel that basically empowerment that comes with the shift from the passengers to the pilot seat. And once we start feeling that rush of confidence and basically sometimes even euphoria, it can become kind of addictive onto itself. And once that happens, the process of moving from the passengers to the pilot seat becomes kind of a self-sustaining process. The confidence that will follow from that is absolute magic. And once that happens, the world opens up. We start to live in a reality full of opportunities instead of in a reality full of potential crises and problems and troubles and struggles. And once that happens, well,